I am ready. Yeah, so General is also co-host.
Okay, you're right, you're live, you can go.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the session of Ask General Muntu. My name is Agather Atuhaire, and I am with General online and on this space. And the idea of these conversations really is to get his view, but most importantly, the view of the Alliance for National Transformation on the issues going on in the country, and also what would be their alternative policies on those issues, so that we know what we would expect was the Alliance for National Transformation to take part in this country. And today I don't want to follow the procedure we have been following of asking questions. I want to allow the members listening to be the ones to ask the questions, and I put a call earlier to let us know what issues they want General to address. I already have a number of them, but I want to start by asking the General his general view of the country right now, be it political, be it economic, be it security-wise, so that we start off from there. General, you're welcome, and please, if you could unmute and we start the conversation.
Thank you, Agatha. Thank you for hosting me. I'd also like to thank all the people who've put aside time to be part of the conversation. Our situation is fluid, unfortunately. And maybe let me refer to one grave error that we did as a country. People may at some point possibly feel that we repeat it too much, but it is something that we must keep harping on. 2005, when the Constitution was amended and the term limits was removed, it opened a situation of uncertainty. At that time, most people did not recognize what it meant, but gradually that's what it has come to be. There are many African countries that have gone through turbulent transitions, one-party state status, military coups, so many all over the continent. So by the time many African countries adopted that constitutional inclusion in their constitution, it was basically meant to be a stabilizing factor, so that in spite of the weaknesses in the process of building institutions, in the process of establishing good governance systems, that there would be a safety valve, that if they were good leaders, it would be good for the country. They would put in 5 or 10 years and add value to whatever would have been ongoing in that country. But in the event that there were leaders who were poor in governance, that there would be a limit, that they would get out, another group gets in. And it is to a large extent working well in most countries where that was maintained. We removed it. And I think it almost reopened the vicious cycle that we've been going through since 1962. Right now, the biggest threat to stability in the country, where there are other problems, for example, in the rising cost of living, high prices, high fuel prices, strikes of civil servants, and all that. Those even happen in stable democratic countries. However, the biggest threat that we have is uncertainty of a transition, a smooth transition. Seeing one government leaving power peacefully, another government coming in. And to me, that is the most worry above all other things that may be happening, which are not that critical, of a threat in terms of potential for a crisis in the country. We hope we will sail through it, much as that grave error was done by people who couldn't look far, who were carrying on about, I think, themselves and their immediate needs in their lives and whatever else they were looking at. That's the summary I can give.
Thank you, General. When I look through the suggestions that people are talking about, it's really the issues that we would have touched on anyway. And one of them is the parish development model. What are your views about it? Will it work? Are you optimistic that it is, as they have called it, the silver bullet that will help us develop in this country the development we're really struggling with? So yeah, what is your view of that initiative?
Well, I have heard someone describe it as a work in progress, because it looks like there wasn't any deep study of that concept and or the model they are trying to apply. Of course, it involves significant amounts of money. But again, I think it goes back to the thinking within the regime, because in my own understanding, for you to deploy such huge resources, you really needed to have put significant amounts of time and study in, and then also pilot it. Piloting would have helped if they started on a smaller scale. For example, go to the different sub-regions, select a few parishes. If you go, for example, in each region and you select like 10 to 20 parishes, and then you work on those parishes for 1, 2, 3 years, then you understand where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, you carry out rectification measures, and then by the time you roll it out the rest of the country, you would already have known for sure that you have dealt with the weaknesses within the model. And then once you apply it, you know that the people are going to benefit from it. But we are used to a situation where this regime, you know, does things, one, as knee-jerk reactions, two, as a form of political manipulation. Because I know many projects that they deploy, not so much because they believe that they will work, but they put out money into the population as a way later of renting political support. Because when you have a situation like poverty in the country, and then people know that they are going to get seed money, it doesn't matter even when they have not been trained to put it to good use so it can be multiplied. The immediate is to sort out their immediate needs. And I think mostly the president of the country, General Museveni, has studied very well the psychology of the people. And he knows how to manipulate their emotions. He knows how to manipulate their minds. And we will give it the benefit of doubt. Let's hope it works. But if one was to draw conclusions based on what we have seen in the past around such projects, it may not work in the sense of uplifting the livelihoods of the people. It may only work in terms of still putting them in a state where they hang on to General Museveni and the regime, you know, hoping that something is going to come to them. Like we have seen the youth projects, we have seen all kinds of projects that have been deployed in the past. And unfortunately, the population has not woken up the fact. Okay, send 100 million to a parish. You've not prepared them. You've not trained them. You've not gone out to know how they are going to deploy that money so that they don't consume it, but that they invest it so it can be multiplied and it increases their levels of incomes, but also helps in increasing the wealth of the whole country. it would be a number of projects if it was well studied and applied well, with the end state being the desire to see the upliftment of the living conditions of the people and the growth of the economy. But you deploy 100 million at a go. Let's wait and see. I mean, just in 6 months, between 6 months and 1 year, we'll have known the outcomes. Yes, Agatha.
Yes, actually, the specific question of the person who raised that issue was that how is it different from the previous programs that have aimed at the same, citing Emyoga, Operation Wealth Creation, and a whole host of them. Why should we hope that this one will work? That is a question from Collins.
You know, they have worked only in terms of raising hopes of the people and them remaining glued on the regime. That's the only way it has worked. But in terms of raising the living conditions of people, you out of 10, you not get even 3 people who have benefited out of all those programs in the past. You know, okay. Because entrepreneurship or people investing in businesses and the money which they invest being multiplied, the main issue is not the money itself. The main issue is the training and support systems, so that people can, you would have had to build a robust network of extension workers in agriculture, animal as well as crop, extension workers in terms of giving adequate support to the people who have started in small scale projects, and so that they start with those who start projects and they work with them until they are able to become stable, to grow and expand. We don't have that infrastructure in the first place. There has been no adequate training. The psychology of the population for the longest time since crop finance has been that this is just money for you to consume because you are not even expected to pay it back. And literally, there's no money, I suppose, in all these programs that has been paid back. So if you are dealing in a situation where the psychology, the state of mind of the people is that now they are getting money, free money, many of them are not going to be disciplined enough. 2, I don't know what's supposed to happen. When 100 million is given, are they supposed to put it in group projects? Is it supposed to be divided up and given to each family setting? I don't know. I even see comments in the press. Those who have gone out to teach about it themselves have no clue. The members of parliament, the ministers are giving different messages. So I suppose in some parishes, if they don't have good leadership, once it gets there, I don't know how, depending on the number of families, if they're like, say 100 families, if they see they'll distribute and give 1 million to each, and 1 million, I'm not so sure that out of 100 families, you'll even get 80, 70 who will put it to any project that works out. First, there can be internal fights even within the families. Once they get the 1 million, someone wants to marry, another one wants to pay school fees. They have got maybe a sick person. I really, from a logical perspective, I see real difficulties in this thing working at all. However, we wouldn't want to shoot down something like that. Who knows? Maybe it may work. Let's give it the benefit of doubt. And when it doesn't, then the predictions that we have, at least the expressions of doubt that we have, would have been vindicated. And then hopefully the country can wake up to that fact, because that's where the biggest problem is. The country doesn't wake up. Many people don't wake up. They are duped over and over, over and over. And you almost reach a point where you think that it is a country that is, I don't know whether bewitched or what. You know, you can't be lied to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and you just remain, you know, in the state in which I see most people are.
But some people blame the leaders for not ensuring that. I have had this talk that opposition leaders like you are not providing the leadership that is required for for other citizens to wake up.
We do that all the time. We speak on radios, we speak on TVs. Those who can access social media, we do. We go into campaigns, we go on recruitment missions all over the country. But people are, are really we can't give up. There's no doubt about that. We have been in this struggle for quite a long time, many of us. And we will continue raising the issues that we do raise until a time when the cumulative effect of the piled up errors and mistakes that the regime keeps making will cause a shift, because that one always happens. It's a law of nature, the law of cumulative effect. That always applies. You can never escape it, whoever you are. So in the two things have to happen. One, we keep on trying to sensitize the public, to educate the public, and also hope that leaders at different levels, most of people who are educated, who are not even necessarily in politics direct, to be logical in their interpretation of things, and also to be part of continuing to educate people within their spheres of influence, so that we build a critical mass of people who reach a point and say, no, this can't work. We can no longer go on with a regime which just operates on knee-jerk reaction principle, or a regime which survives by duping people through giving money that is unplanned for. People are not trained, people are not well equipped, people are not supported. But what I know for sure is that the regime benefits from all this. So the issue is not on the regime, because General Museveni benefits from all this. People keep hanging on to him and all these promises he keeps on making. The issue is the population itself, and the population, really, the raising of the consciousness of the population should not just be dependent only upon us as politicians. Even people who are in all walks of life, church leaders, faith leaders, NGOs, women, students, in all their youth groups, they must be, awake to this fact that, what, we've been duped for too long. We must change the situation in this country and work on putting together leaders who can manage the resources of the country. And the country is put on a track of stable, sustainable economic development that will respond to the needs of a growing population. And that's the only logic anybody should operate from. We are 42 million people. We are increasing so fast. I think the population growth rate is 3 point something. We're estimating about 25 years to become 100 million people. You can imagine if we don't have the nature of leaders who know how to apply the resources of the country to prepare it to respond to the needs of such a growing population. It can't be only for us who are in politics. It must be for every Ugandan, because if there's a crisis, it hits all of us. Yes, Agatha.
Yes, Honorable, you have said that you have spoken on radios, but what if speaking is not the leadership that works, that propels the change that we are looking for, because we've seen that speaking hasn't worked this far. What if the leadership they speak of is in another form, or looking at what hasn't worked and devising the means that can work?
Well, we have even engaged in those debates, because as you very well know, there are many proposed strategies out there in the public, and we've been open to that. But as Alliance for National Transformation, one, we believe that continuing to speak and push the message which we speak of building a value-driven leadership program of recruiting people who understand that unless we have a critical number of leaders at different levels, across different generations, across different ethnic groups, across different religious groups, who operate in vehicles being parties, so that when such a party is in power, that it knows it is well equipped, it is well organized, it is well focused in putting the use of the national resources to the development process. That's the only solution. Now, there are those who say, okay, you can, get arms and fight. We have made our position clear that we know that can work only in one way. You can remove a regime like we removed it in '86. But if you have not built a critical number of people who are going to put the national resources to good use, you can end up in the same situation. Because getting weapons and fighting, if you have got 7 out of 10 people who are part of the group that takes power, and there are those who simply want to enrich themselves, as we have seen the group we were with, that's exactly the direction they decided to take. How different would it be? So you resolve one problem, you change one regime, but replace it with another, but you remain in the same vicious cycle. There are also those who talk about civil disobedience, which is a legitimate tool of struggle. It's a legitimate tool of expressing discontent. And we have also seen countries which have been brought down, governments have been brought down through civil disobedience. But track what has happened thereafter. Are they any better off than they were before? To us, at least in the Alliance for National Transformation, we believe that whichever method works, that there must be prior preparation, that you must build a critical number of leaders. Leaders are pillars. The numbers which come, like if you are going to win an election through an electoral process, there you need numbers, you need many votes. But even when you get many votes, if you have not built an organization that is stable in terms of the pillars in that organization, at the national, at the district, at the constituency, at the sub-county and the parish. Leaders who subscribe the values of an organization like we do in Alliance for National Transformation. So that in the event that there's an opportunity, that you are prepared. Because as he said, success is when opportunity meets with preparation. And then you take power, you're not overwhelmed by what is in power, because if you are not prepared, you will be overwhelmed without doubt. We have seen many groups on this continent who are overwhelmed the moment they get into power, if you don't have people who are well prepared. So we have chosen to take that route. I saw someone on my Twitter handle who asked a question. I suppose you may also have seen it, say, why are you asleep? Many people don't recognize the path we have chosen to take. It is deliberate. We are not going to stray from it. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, we were having training of the Youth League, and we had about 70 youth from all over the country. And in our interactions, I was telling the youth leaders that to me, at this point in time where we are at, meetings and trainings of that nature are more critical than, for example, I, Muntu, standing on a platform and addressing 50,000 people on a rally at any point in this country at this point in time. That can come during elections. Right now, it's a period of preparation. Get the number of people who would be pillars in the organization, and therefore pillars in the governance system the moment the organization takes power. You need people who are resilient. We have seen for 60 years, everybody who gets into power, out of 10, 7, 8 get drunk, around pomp and glory, around money, around, choosing to take the easy route. Now, if an organization takes power and they find out of 10 of the leaders in the organization, 7 of them are of that nature, that organization is going to take the country anywhere. It's not going to break the country out of this vicious cycle. So preparation, therefore, is very, very critical to us. So I don't remember the name of the colleague who said, you guys, you are asleep. We are not asleep. We are building in a systematic way. Yes, we have got our own handicaps. We still have handicaps of resources, but at least that's our desire. That's our intention. And we're going to keep doing that. And I believe by God's grace, we will succeed. 2, I've kept on saying another thing, which many people may not even appreciate. While Alliance for National Transformation may not seem to be so huge and all that, I have a feeling that people who choose to join Alliance for National Transformation right now, as we are, that's an opportunity for us. Because anybody who comes in Alliance for National Transformation as a member, as a leader, as material for leadership, you know that you have got someone who is getting into the party out of commitment. They are not getting in because of excitement. Excitement has been a problem on this continent. people can go into formation, some which become temporary. I've seen many African countries where you can see huge masses of people supporting a group. It goes into power, it messes up. Next round, huge numbers shift, go to another group. They get into power, they mess up. Why? Because many of them don't do the adequate preparation. And where people don't see huge numbers, they think that can't be a winning horse, so they don't go there. We are still lucky those who move out of excitement are not with us. We need people who are focused. We need people who will be resilient, because we know the moment when we take power, which I believe will happen by God's grace, then we will have that resilience rooted in people who would have joined an organization not out of excitement, but out of conviction. Many people don't seem to understand that, but I think it is to advantage at this point in time. I know we have gone to places and people don't see numbers. They comment, some of them in a derogatory way. I don't bother, get bothered by that, because I know, like, the number of young people, men and women who are joining this party, they are the future of this country. And I thank God that they keep coming. They may not come in thousands, but those who come, you can know that these people who are working out of hardship, these people who still come even when they don't see the crowds, that they can be dependable.
So General, when Ugandans, like the one you mentioned, ask why you are sleeping, yet you have been speaking to people. We have been having these conversations for, I think now, maybe well over 6 months. So doesn't that then show that talking is not working? That probably there are some more options that can be explored. And allow me add that when you talked about picking up arms or something like that as an option, there's a message in my inbox someone sent earlier saying, when is Mugisha Muntu going to the bush, or is he willing to be led by baby dinosaur? I think that was the person's way of referring to General Mohozi. I don't know, but so that ties in with that when they are saying we were sleeping or the party is sleeping, there's probably more that should be done than what we are doing. What is that? If going to the bush, like the person says, is not an option, what more options are you looking at?
One, we are certainly not asleep. We keep organizing, we keep operating. The number of Zoom meetings we have with our coordinators in the diaspora, the number of Zoom meetings we have with our coordinators within the districts, the trainings we have done. For example, immediately after elections, people may not know that, in April, because local government elections end in Feb, in April and May, we conducted 21 sub-regional meetings and met all our candidates. 95% of the 740 candidates whom we met. Did the analysis of what we had just gone through, discussed the way forward, and that interaction helped a lot, because we were still a young party then, and there are many people who could have simply thrown in the tire and run. So we also didn't know what the reaction was going to be when we go down there. We didn't have resources to give them adequate support. What was gratifying was that 90+% of the candidates who operate in those kind of situations were very firm and said, we must keep building, we must build resilience, we must make more sacrifices. That's what building is all about. Immediately after that, there was, I think, another short lockdown. We continued conducting Zoom meetings with all nature of, with the diaspora, with the internal coordinators. Immediately after that, I think it was in 2021, in August and September, we conducted meetings or workshops and trained all the local leaders who had passed through on Alliance for National Transformation ticket. 50 of them, and they are doing quite well where they are. You can imagine even NRM, which has got all the resources, they have never met their candidates. They have never trained all the local councillors. We trained all ours. That's what organization is all about. Okay, unfortunately, we have not rolled out. We did pilot projects around districts where we visited the sub-counties, like what we did in Bugweri, what we did in Namaingo, what we did in Serere, what our colleagues did in Terego, where you would go and meet opinion leaders at sub-county level in all the sub-counties in such a district, which we had wanted to roll out in the whole country. We are still hampered by resources. It's still our desire to do that. Now, a party which is doing all that can't be sleeping. Two, preparation is very, very important. And when we're talking about preparation, a party to succeed in power, the number of people you need who are well trained, who are well organized, are not the millions who vote necessarily. No, it is those who are critical in party management, party running, and therefore how the government itself would be run. Now, a delegates conference of a party like Alliance for National Transformation would be around 1,500 to 2,000 people. The moment you have got 2,000 Ugandans all over the country, established at the village, parish, and sub-county and constituency, district and national level. And out of the 2,000, you have got 1,200, 1,500 who are deeply rooted in the values, principles, and ideology of an organization. That party is well prepared. That's what we're working on, and it will be systematic. Because I know by God's grace, when we take power, we will see a difference that this country has never seen. Because we are deliberate in terms of what we do. Don't panic, because if we are people who panic, would have gone, with so many proposals that people come about as to how we should be popular, as to how we should do this. We don't do populist things. We don't, So, and it's not that we are failing. No, we are succeeding because all these young men and women who keep coming, who are building blocks of an organization, who are driven by values, who work out of commitment and are resilient, that is success. I would rather have 100 young men and women joining a party who have got that character than have 50,000 voters who move because of crowds any day.
So there are two related questions to that in the comment section. And one, Shigundu says the party is impotent and dormant. Are they cooking something serious? And the other one asked that they would like to know if you are still in Uganda's politics.
I don't know whether those colleagues who asked those questions, I saw them, whether they are on this platform now. If they are, what I've just talked about would clearly show them that we're operating. We're operating. Let me say another thing about Alliance for National Transformation, which most people don't understand. To understand us, one would need to Google and understand the characteristics of a plant. There's a plant called the Chinese bamboo. I'd like to interest those who are listening to go and check it out, what happens with Chinese bamboo. Chinese bamboo, a seed, once you sow a seed of a Chinese bamboo, which of course under the soil, it never emerges out of the soil for about 5 years. You don't see it. But if you know its characteristics and you keep watering, you don't panic. In the 5th year, it comes out of the soil. And in the first 1 year, it grows up to about 80 to 90 feet in 1 year. So you have to ask yourself, what was happening in the 5 years? What it does in the 5 years, it grows down. It doesn't grow up. It grows the root networks. Why? Because by its nature, once a plant is 80, 90 foot high, with the winds that happen, if it's not deeply rooted, it will just be uprooted. It will fall on the ground. That's why you find like when a hurricane comes, pawpaws just fall all over, banana plantations fall all over, because they are deep, their roots are very shallow. We are building networks. We are deepening the message that we keep sending. We are recruiting like-minded young men and women to operate not only now, but also the generations to come. Because you can't have an organization which is successful unless it has got in-depth understanding of people across different generations. So that when generation is leaving, the next generation is prepared, it gets into step. You can see like what's happening in Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew left, and you can see the subsequent leadership, disciplined, focused, and moving the same path, of development, of growing a country which is quite, advanced in many ways. It was a third country like we were in 1962, same level in terms of GDP per capita, around $300. It's now at 45,000. We are still at around 1,000, and many African countries within this region were the same level. We're all around the same, GDP per capita. They have got the largest shareholding per capita, more than even many European and even America itself doesn't have the same shareholding per capita. I think Singapore, out of 100 citizens, 8 of them have got shareholding in companies operating within the economy. It refines petroleum products. It doesn't even have one oil well. That's focus, that's organization, that's discipline. They build the necessary infrastructure to govern, and you can see why they have taken that country. So that's what we are doing as Alliance for National Transformation. The good thing is that Uganda has got many brilliant young men and women. The only thing is how to tap into them, for them to understand what we are up to. And then we all become building blocks and build something which is going to be sustainable. And also to be an example, the rest of the African countries. There are some which have emerged, like Ghana has pulled out of the doldrums and the chaos it used to be in. They have pulled out. You can see they are on the right path. We've got countries in Africa which never became unstable, like Botswana. So we need to increase the number of African countries that become success stories. And then we rise as we need to, as an African people. And then we can help in the stability of the whole world. Because what's happening at the global scale is also quite frightening. And it should be more frightening the African people. There's a realignment of forces globally. African leaders, some of them are so, immersed in how to survive, how to build wealth as at an individual level. They don't look at maybe the global dynamics. We do, as Alliance for National Transformation. And we hope that there will be Ugandans who will be convinced about who we are, what we are at, and then they can give more support in terms of financial support, in terms of policy inputs and all that. So colleagues, we are not sleeping. We work day and night.
Okay, General, thank you for those responses, and maybe to remind our viewers and listeners on the space that this conversation, we will ask General the questions that you want him to answer. And we will not be able to allow people to ask directly because we are also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. But if you send the questions, I will, as I'm doing, alternate between the questions I have prepared for General and the questions that come from you, the audience. And this conversation will run up to 6:45, so we still have about an hour to talk about all the questions. So General, on the economy, on the economy, we have many questions that have come in, but I'm going to start with the 48.1 trillion budget that was passed last month. And my question on that budget is that you must have had, or had people, the issues people have had with it. What is the ANT's position on that budget?
You're muted.
Sorry, I was unmuted since. I hope I can be heard now. 3.9 trillion was provided for, 3.7 for healthcare. That is still less than the 3.9 trillion, which was put into security and the security infrastructure. 5.1 trillion was direct financing for local government, which is good, still inadequate. 4.3 trillion towards the transport infrastructure development and maintenance. 381.6 billion allocated the judiciary, 95 billion for the Director of Public Prosecutions, 876 billion for the Uganda Police, 308 billion for the Uganda Prison Service, 79 billion for the Inspectorate of Government. That's a critical area. Of course, the judiciary and all departments linked to justice. And the 1.059 trillion for the parish development model. There are improvements in the different sectors in terms of allocation. However, what is worrying though, when you see the debt, I think GDP, the debt to GDP ratio has increased about 55 billion. I don't know, 55%. Public debt right now stands at 73 trillion. Now, the worry in that, worry in a number of sectors, the amounts of money which have been pushed there, if well utilized, could help in the upliftment of the standards in those sectors, like in health. The underlying factor of indiscipline and corruption and the debt repayment can affect us in several ways. One, that the funds which are sent, that the percentage of utilization, that which goes to real work as is programmed or as is voted for, it can't have maximum impact unless you literally wipe out corruption, which is not going to happen in the shortest possible time, as we see the nature of the regime. The indiscipline in collections, because this is a projection. If you don't realize revenue collections to the projected levels, then there will be shortfalls in terms of projects which can be implemented, because if you don't have revenues, then you are not going to apply them. Corruption is deep, and I think it is the biggest threat. Besides the threat of uncertainty in terms of transition, I think the second largest national threat is corruption, which has eaten literally in all sectors. One, when corruption is that deep, this kind of budget with all these figures which are mentioned, part of it is not realized in the process of collections, revenue collections. Part of it will not be realized at the end point because of the leakages that happen between the ministries and at the point of application. Unfortunately, I have not managed to get a study yet to look at data that shows those kinds of shortfalls. But the general levels of hemorrhage in the economy, because it has reached about 2 billion United States dollars per year, at least according to the World Bank statistics, that's huge. I think that is the biggest area of challenge that I notice in the current budget. Of course, the other problem that I notice is that agriculture, investments in agriculture is still very, very low. Investments in tourism is also still quite low. And yet agriculture is where we have comparative advantage. Tourism is a low-hanging fruit. So we'll wait and see how it is applied. In spite of all those concerns, if there was discipline and the money is well deployed in a focused way in all these areas, it could move us. amidst the challenges that we face as a country. Of course, unfortunately, we are also operating at a time when there is a global problem of rising costs. I mean, rising costs of fuel, rising costs of commodities. And if the predictions that we notice, which are global, where they are talking about possible famine, that will also impact on the budgets of countries. And we are not an exception. The only countries that can survive are those which are disciplined, which prepared early enough. The ones which have got fuel reserves, the ones which have got food reserves. In the countries like Uganda, where we have none, and also where we have indiscipline and corruption, we will be highly vulnerable if the predictions of famine hit us, and if also the war in Ukraine doesn't end fast, and the prices of fuel go down, even if we had reserves, because most countries that have reserves would have like 3 months to 6 months. The moment the fuel prices continue escalating, you can even run out of reserves. So the only thing you depend upon in that regard is discipline in management and national cohesion. When a regime is seen to be responsible, when people in a country notice that the regime or government in power is doing all things humanly possible, it is doing the sacrifices that is asking the rest of the country to have. If you talk about tightening belts, for the leaders also to have tightened belts, for them to see them being frugal in the management of the resources within a budget, to know that there's zero tolerance corruption, to hear anybody who's stolen money is being arrested, tried, and if found guilty, sentenced. Then you can build a state of cohesion in the country to go through a crisis of this nature, which could escalate in the event that famine comes to be, as is predicted in a number of studies that we have seen globally. And if the fuel resources, the fuel prices also continue escalating. So the budget as it is can meet even more challenges than the ones we've talked about in regard at the local level, being impacted by the global situation. In that regard, the fallback position being disciplined. We don't have a disciplined government. We don't have a culture of zero tolerance corruption. So we should tighten our belts and really prepare for what could be the worst than we have seen yet.
Okay. Tighten our belts is what we have been told in the face of the rising cost of living that you talk about. And so we've been told not to expect the government to do more, but for us, the citizens, to tighten our belts. What is your view that government refuses to, like some other governments that are hit by the same global economic challenges, to subsidize or maybe take any other measures that would ease the conditions of ordinary people in these challenges?
Well, some of the things can't be done, unfortunately, because initially when we were hit, I don't know how many months we've been in this crisis so far, about 5 months, 3, 4. If there were fuel reserves, that's always the first thing that you do. You start controlling the prices of fuel or managing them, because you start releasing reserves into the economy, and then you can manage like fuel prices like diesel, which is a critical factor in transportation of goods and people, and also in the production processes of the country. When you do that, if you have got fuel reserves to carry you through like 6 months of crisis, then you plan other measures. 2, you can cut down on taxes. But for you to cut down on taxes of like fuel and other like food commodities, you would have had to prepare a country and know that there's once a population sees a country where government is disciplined. Because the moment you cut down on taxes, it means that the revenue collection projections are not going to be realized. Now, if you don't realize the revenue collection projections, it means that the budgets themselves will be affected. That means whatever you'll be put in like physical infrastructure, into health, into education, will also be affected. So you need to have psychologically prepared the country for the country to stand together and move through such a crisis. But you see, for a country to move together through a crisis, there must be trust between the people and the government. In our case, there's no such trust. I mean, we see those who are in the government really reckless in terms of stealing and looting and all nature of schemes that they get involved in. So even if they tell people to tighten their belts, we know that theirs are loosened, on a daily basis. So people are not going to trust that. So when I say we'll have to prepare to tighten our belts, I mean, we're in a country where it is like the government is not saying directly in words, but in the actions, it is like saying, you guys, you are on your own. So if you're on your own, what do? You cannot keep on, lamenting. You have to keep organizing. And this particular case, the only thing we need to keep organizing is to hasten the exit of this regime. That's the only practical way I see out of this, even as we do whatever we have to do at personal levels, tighten our belts, but we must also keep getting more and more convinced that we cannot continue like this, that we must do everything humanly possible to hasten the exit of such a regime, so that the future that could even come with more crises as the population increases, that there will be more responsible government. That's why those of us who are in the opposition, we have to work day and night, really. It will be the worst nightmare when this regime exits. For any group that goes in when it is not fully prepared, and therefore remain in the same vicious cycle. Agatha.
Agatha, you're on mute.
And I saw another question which came on the platform. I think someone was asking that why do parties go into institutions of high learning to participate in the institutions of high learning? I think they were responding to a tweet that we had given out in regard to our candidate in Makere, Isaiah. Now, institutions of high learning are like kilns. That's the way I look at it. They're like kilns. Kilns where you prepare bricks. If the institutions are ineffective, as when a kiln is ineffective, and therefore the bricks are not well burned, if you use those bricks in putting up a construction, a building, the integrity of that building is highly questionable because it would be weak. So in higher institutions of learning, people go there not only for academics, but to prepare them. They are like incubators, to prepare them fully, because once they get out of the gates of the university, they're the ones who are going to manage society in different areas. And one of the areas where they need to be prepared is in terms of political consciousness. So the parties, what the parties need to do, and really that's one thing as Alliance for National Transformation, the moment we take power, those universities that don't allow parties to operate in the campuses, that will be the end of such university policy. Students must be well prepared in the sense that you cannot keep them shielded from partisan politics as if they are kindergarten kids. They need to operate an environment where there's contestation, but also learn to be civil, to build capabilities for tolerance. There's no you can build democracy without tolerance. To be equipped in the manner in which they can manage when they get out there in society. Because if they get out of universities, when they are completely oblivious of what is happening in the rest of the country, how would you have prepared them? So one thing, the parties themselves must be good examples, because for you to groom leaders, to groom them to be good, you must also be good. So it's a dual thing. We must do that in terms of how we organize parties, how they participate in all platforms, including the universities. So the students are not only prepared academically, but they're also prepared in social political ways, that they become responsible leaders. What is happening in the institutions in some cases is quite frightening as we speak, because you see the same culture outside universities has infiltrated the universities. I've been following some of the campaigns on the universities. You get like some of the vibrant young people who mobilize and blow vuvuzelas, and they're the ones who whip up emotions within the campuses, and therefore create the impression that this is the most popular candidate. And then, unfortunately, you find that the students who are going to vote are swayed by that. They don't listen to the message. And then when we're in a crisis we are in, because of the ineptness of leaders at the national level, then people ask themselves, what's the problem? You reap what you sow. Because these students in the universities are the ones who will become national leaders at different levels within society. So if they act out of emotion other than out of logic when they're at the universities, you tell me how they act out of logic when they are in positions of responsibility. I mean, I can't understand how people can't see that, something that simple.
Thank you, General. We going back to the economy. I have a question from Lusime Kriston, who is asking about the middle income status, and he's calling it the battle between World Bank and UBOS. And of course, you could add the president who started it in his State of the Nation address. What is your view that Uganda has now become a middle income country?
I really don't want to be sucked into that debate as to whether it is in the medium or not yet. The question is, what is happening to the farmer down there on the ground? What is happening to the teacher? Is he getting well paid? What's happening to the health worker? Are they being well paid? That's where the question is. Even if they certified, all of them and said we are middle level status, but people are not being well paid. If there is still corruption to the extent that 2 billion United States dollars still being lost, is not being applied to keep on building the economy. It's a statistical argument. And we don't have our own in-house capabilities to investigate it. You're required to study a lot of data. So I suppose that debate will continue between the government and between the World Bank. I think for those of us who really want to see change in terms of the living conditions of the people, we must keep focused on fighting corruption, working to hasten the exit of this regime, and preparing as opposition parties as well, so that whichever party takes power, that it is well prepared to put the national resources at the disposal of the treasury through revenue collection, inject it into health, into education, into food security, work on infrastructure, put up robust systems to support entrepreneurship in agriculture, in the service, in manufacturing, and create an environment where an economy steadily keeps growing and people feel it. And they also realize that, yes, whatever debate that there is, that we are feeling that there are improvements. Right now, yes, it is important. We need to follow that debate closely so that eventually we know who is saying what. My suspicion is that this regime doctors figures all the time, you know, but that argument is still academic, you know. It says.
Okay, still on the economic situation, there's a question from Tamale, who asks about your plan or guide towards the current economic situation, which I think you have answered, but he has the question continues to ANT's position on the increasing strikes of civil servants over salaries.
I don't think we're about to see an end to that unless the regime wakes up and fixes a number of things. One to be, you know, economy has got its own challenges. I highly doubt whether they can give a living wage to all workers in all sectors. But I think the biggest problem we have just started earlier on. When you have a situation of that nature, leadership, by example, becomes the best way of holding a country together, people making the necessary sacrifices to grow an economy to a level where everybody can get adequate remuneration for the work done. Now, before you get there, what is needed? One is discipline at the level of government. For leaders to walk the talk. You talk about sacrifice, tighten your own belt. You're managing national resources, manage them well so that people don't see leakages. If there are leakages, be prompt in terms of plugging a loophole, arresting people who've committed an act of corruption, trying them, having them sentenced, and them serving sentences once you have got good evidence. Therefore, that builds trust and people live on hope. And then also when you're applying like salary increases, plan it well. This one of the teachers is the most mad intervention that I've ever heard of. You escalate one group of teachers from by 300%, the science teachers, and you leave the arts teachers. And that's the most insane thing to do, because they could have systematically increased all by cutting down on the level of percentage of what they gave the science teachers, and also to ensure that there is uniformity. Yes, I understand fully that there are times when there are demand for certain areas. For example, in the teaching population, it is not only here in Uganda. When you look globally, I have looked at UK. I've looked at like US, like I think Australia, and there are variations. For example, in the US, you have 52 states, and you find like pay grades are not necessarily similar, but you'll find closeness. You'll find that in a number of states, the science teachers may get a little bit higher, but not only science teachers. You'll get like, even with the science subjects, you'll find like those who teach chemistry are on high demand, and therefore you'll find remuneration which is a little bit higher. But it's not only on science, it is on a number of other areas. I have looked, for example, in the United States, there's what they call English as a second language. It is one of the most highly remunerated areas. Now, English is not a science, but it is on high demand, and therefore the teachers who go in that area are well remunerated. I have seen like librarians. Librarians are not necessarily scientists, and library technicians. Those are in the area of equipping or putting in place systems that support studies, whoever is studying, whether it is sciences, whether it is arts. And you find that they are amongst those who are highly paid, at least on an hourly basis. Then you'll find that the lack that they have when they are planning, they have projections. Like now, I've seen a projection of what would be on demand by 2030. So it helps countries to plan in how to respond to that. Again, one of the projections for 2030 is English as a second language, which is looked at, because globally, that's on a global scale, because 1 in 5 kids speaks a language different from English at home. And therefore you find that there's a lot of demand in training people of that need. And then also mathematics. But they also find that social studies are also another area which is projected to be on high demand by 2030. In Uganda, I don't know whether we project in terms of what is going to be needed by 2030 or by 2040. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the sciences. So you can have basic pay for arts and science teachers, which is more or less equal, and then you give allowances to those areas of teaching that's on high demand. And many times it doesn't even have to be the sciences. For example, you find teaching for special needs in a number of countries. It is highly remunerated. You find that in some countries, elementary school teachers are on high demand, at least the payment per hour. I've noticed like in the United States of America. So if you study well a situation, relevant the needs of the country, you can give higher allowances to those areas of need. Like now, if Swahili has been brought in and it is seen to be of strategic importance in terms of trade in the whole East African community, in terms of building the capabilities of regional integration, you may have to give higher allowances than others who are teaching different subjects because there's scarcity. You may even have to pay higher because you may have to import teachers from Tanzania and Kenya. So that would be understandable, but you need to ensure that the ranges are not so huge. And the best thing would be the basic to be same, and then you give high allowances according to need. But overall, the cost of living consideration must be the bottom line. In the area of education, again, which is like the area of police and the army, because also those are critical areas for stability of the country. Now, globally, except for very, very few countries, and when you trace, you find those countries have got smaller population. But overall, countries which have got huge population, you'll find that areas like education, because teachers tend to be a big number. The army tends to be a big number. Police tends to be a big number. Most cases, you'll find that they'll not be as well paid, for example, as people who would be in enterprise, working in companies. However, the difference that there is, when you study, you find that even in countries where teachers are not as well paid as the rest of the professions, they attract people who are called to be educators, because that's another thing we lose sight of. Remuneration is not the only thing that leads to career decisions, like what has happened in this country, where people are going into professions because that's where you get better pay. People become lawyers, people become doctors, even people who don't have a calling to be healthcare service providers, or people who don't believe in justice. That's why you find doctors who hate patients, or find lawyers who don't have any understanding of justice. And therefore they go there because of remuneration. So in the last 50 years of disorientation in this country, people have been attracted more to the money you'll get out of profession than to what is your calling. And when you have an unfortunate situation like we have, where you don't have the country paying, at least in regard to the cost of living conditions, that whoever is a teacher, whoever is in whatever area of endeavor they are in, or service they are in, that the money they are getting is enough or adequate to enable them to pay for their kids, or if they are not paying for kids, that their bursaries or loan, or they can take their loved ones to hospitals. If there is no health insurance scheme, but see, if there is a national health insurance scheme, and therefore you are not paying out of your pocket, if there is free education and it is quality education, that supplements your salary because you are not paying direct. All these systems have to work together. But in a broken system like ours, people are vulnerable. And therefore, even a person who would have been called to teach, you are going to lose that one because they're going to go to another area where they think they'll be getting money. And they're going to live an unhappy life because happiness doesn't come out of money. It comes out of serving the calling that is within you.
Okay.
That disorientation and the mixed up situation we have is a challenge of those of us who are in the opposition to prepare to rectify.
Thank you, General. And now on matters foreign policy and military issues, I have a question from Semju Faisal. who says, what's your comment on Uganda's foreign policy? Issues arising between Uganda and Ethiopia. And I should add the war in DRC and our involvement there. And also the army being put on alert and measures to, the army being put on alert. And I want to combine that with Muchibi's question, which is related to the same, asking how you feel when UPDF has become personalized. I hope you've got both the questions, General.
Let me attempt. If I don't cover them all, then I hope you reply.
Yes.
Foreign policy is as personalized.
General, kindly unmute.
Sorry. I believe I'll have to start from the beginning. I was saying that the most unfortunate thing in our situation in regard to foreign policy, General Museveni personalizes foreign policy as he tries to personalize the military and literally almost all other areas of activity, including even the economy. Now, the biggest challenge he has always had, and he has been so unlucky that he has not been able to change that, is he's a micromanager. Micromanagers are incapable of building functioning systems or building institutions or strengthening them where they are weak. By the nature of micromanagement, the individual builds things around himself or herself. And that's the unfortunate thing that we do have, because right now you can't even know, like foreign policy is what General Museveni determines, and his own schemes, domestic as well as regional and international. And that's where we are. I mean, his main focus is survival in power. So any foreign policy actions that he has must supplement whatever he's doing to lengthen his stay in power. And it boils down to that. And therefore, as long as the methods of operation remain that, we will not have a coherent regional or foreign policy position as a country that is predictable, that anybody can look at and know that this country is on this path, and they are consistent in what is written, it's consistent with how they act, and therefore you can predict them in the next 10 years or 5 years, the direction that they are taking. He plays as a survivor. I mean, he's done that for a while, manipulating one group against another internally, as well as at the regional and at the global level. Now we are living in a very, very complicated environment because many African countries have got also their own internal challenges. We've got Ethiopia, which has got internal challenges. We've got Sudan, which has internal challenges, south as well as north. We have got Somalia. It's not nearby. It is a bit far, but the instability in Somalia affects the whole region because the instability in Somalia affects the whole coastal region of East Africa. We are a country which is in the hinterland. Any instability along the East African coast will destabilize Dar es Salaam, will destabilize Mombasa, therefore the impact on us directly. We've got a challenge in DRC, So that's quite a complex situation. One would hope, therefore, that in that kind of situation, that the focus of all the 7 leaders of East Africa would be on how to work out mechanisms, building trust, and build a robust infrastructure for integration in terms of the economy, in terms of politics, in terms of security. Why? Because of the external threat. we are a region which is well endowed, heavily endowed in terms of mineral resources. Congo has now come on board. It has huge deposits of all nature of minerals. South Sudan has got huge deposits of mineral resources and oil. Uganda same, Tanzania same, Kenya same. Now, we need to know that in the nature of the global dynamics, the realignment of forces, anybody who is educated enough should follow the trend. In the next 10 years, the global situation will be so radically different from what it is now. So how do we position ourselves, even for survival as a people? It would be in how to build networks, one, first within internally, the domestic level, to ensure that there is stability in the politics of the countries. So the countries are stable, the 7 units, and therefore they build a stable region. And then we're able to exploit those resources, the advantage of our own people, and also to cushion ourselves from any situation that could be of threat from outside. That's what one would hope everybody would be doing. But because of survival politics, when you find regimes like here, he wants to hang on at any cost, and therefore he has to manipulate the internal political dynamics, which weaken the country itself. And once you do that, you become a weak link in the region. And that's what all the 7 countries should be doing. Become stable internally, and therefore they build a stable region, and therefore it becomes an active actor on the continental scale and also on the global scale. That's in terms of foreign affairs. M23, and all, because there are many, there are more than 20 groups in DRC who are destabilizing factors. My hope, really, is that, again, the 7 leaders, because they've decided to deploy a military force, East African military force, but they must invest a lot in diplomacy, intra-regional diplomacy. They must go into closed rooms, look each other in the eyes, and say, guys, we face an existential threat as a people in this, singularly as countries, but also regionally as a region, but also at a continental level, because we are so unstable. And the rest of the world is looking for resources. America is looking for raw materials. Europe is looking for raw materials. China is looking for raw materials. We face an existential threat. If we are not able to build robust economies, robust technological bases on which we can advance in terms of technological innovations, build robust security systems where we are not suspecting each other, but we are working together for common security, I can tell you we can easily be recolonized. Not directly, maybe politically, but on a sustained economic level, to the extent, because again, one thing we need to look at, we are growing very, very, very fast as a population, on a, not only here in Uganda, but on a continental scale, because it's estimated in the next 30 years, Africa will move from 1.4 billion, 2.3 billion people. Now you can imagine a population of that magnitude if they don't have jobs. If they don't have infrastructure for health, for education, transport infrastructure, rural-urban migration, with cities which are not well planned, without food insecurity, would be highly vulnerable and will be fully exploited, because nature, the way it is, we have not reached the time when lambs can sleep in the bosoms of lions. We have not reached there yet. The culture and philosophy of survival right now, globally, is survival of the fittest. We must build our own capabilities. These nitwits, some of them who run countries, and they're attracted more by self-advancement and greed and corruption, and they're not looking at such nature of existential threat. We must work to hasten their exit in whichever country they exist, including here, where we are.
Okay, General, thank you for that. And the other question was about the reports of the army being put on alert recently, must have been last week. And in the end, we learned that General Museveni had addressed the army, and one of the issues was about how they are using, the army officers are using their social media. And it's clearly he was talking about his son, who made comments about the Ethiopian conflict and accusing Ethiopia of abusing human rights. He had previously made comments about the Russian-Ukraine war and also about the DRC. Although the army spokesperson Felix Kulaije came and said anyone's personal opinion cannot be taken as opinion of the UPDF, but President Museveni stopped the officials from using their Twitter handle to talk about security matters. What is your view about that?
It's really painful for me for these two words go through my mouth. I never at any time would want to say that really we are operating like a banana republic. It's painful to say, but again, it would be naive of me not to admit that fact, that we are like a banana republic. It is only in a banana republic where such actions can happen, like an officer, a general of an army, send such tweets, and you don't get immediate action from the authorities of government of that country. I mean, it can't happen anyways. Even in the region, that something like that can't happen in Kenya, it can't happen in Tanzania. Forget about, you talk about the developed countries elsewhere. It shows you the nature of our situation as a country, you know? I mean, once you are in uniform and more or less at the level of a general, discipline is a basic requirement. You need to know what to say, where to say it, the audience that there is, you know? Because, well, it took me a long time to even admit that the account could have belonged to a military officer. But now that they have come out and stopped that, basically that shows that indeed it was. The surprise is that it took that long. You know, you can cause conflict on the security, even at the security level between countries, and it can be costly. So if on one side the country is trying to build stability, and then a senior person, like maybe in cabinet or like a senior security officer, is sending those kinds of tweets, what do you think is going to happen in a country if it's a neighboring country, or if it's a country within the region? You know? So that's one weakness that I noticed, but I also recognize the dynamics that we are involved in. The General Museveni must be caught between a rock and a hard place. And we, as a people, need to keep reflecting. I keep saying this, a mistake which was done, 2005, the amendment of that constitution was a grave error. We wouldn't be sucked into this mess of uncertainty that we are in now. But in the past, we cannot complain about what has already happened. We must work to see how we can have a transition that is stable. However, uncertain the situation may seem, we cannot afford, more so people who are in politics, and I would like to urge many of the political actors, more so those who are in the opposition, we cannot afford to be desperate, however bleak the situation might seem to be. Because one, frustration or desperation is never a solution. Two, leaders, however tough a situation you may find yourself in, you never let yourself become frustrated or desperate. Because frustration or desperation creates the mind of the person who is desperate or frustrated to lose focus. And this is not a time that leaders should lose focus. When a very, very working on very slippery ground. So we all need to be focused, disciplined, see how to work through this, what could become a crisis. We pray to God that we don't face any crisis, because I don't want to sound as if I am a prophet of doom. I am not. I am an eternal optimist, if anything. Also a realist, recognizing that there are challenges that we must face. So we have to see how to work through that in many different ways. Some which we can talk about openly, some which may not necessarily talk about openly, but that we see how we can all work together across the population, across different ethnic groups, across different religious groups, across different parties, and build networks of people who want to ensure that this country does not slide into a crisis. Now, as to the class by stand one, I heard about it on radio. Actually, some radios rang me and I expressed my opinion then. And that's the highest level of alertness of an army, which means that no movement of personnel, no movement of equipment. Every soldier must be accounted for, and that you are in readiness waiting for instructions what to do next. That's rare. On the surface of things, I didn't see any reason why they would have been class by stand one, standby class one, as was announced. But later, what we see filtering through from the meeting that they held when General 7 came from Rwanda, there seemed to be a breakdown in communications, which is also something that should be of concern, because when you find the commander-in-chief communicated to the deputy CDF, the deputy CDF sent a message, and then the commander land forces contradicts the message. That means there was a breakdown in communications at the highest level. That's something that they should really sort out. If there is anything that can really cause problems, it is having uncoordinated troop movements. The last time we heard of uncoordinated troop movements, I think, was in 1980. I think by Muwanga is the one who talked about uncoordinated troop movements. That's not something anybody would desire. And therefore, they need to enforce discipline at that level, and have open channels of communication amongst themselves and not cause confusion amongst themselves, which can spill over to the rest of us, They need to really wake up, those who may have whatever is going in their heads. We're a country of 45 million people. They need to be careful in the manner in which they handle national security issues, Some of them should not think that when you're in an office, that's the beginning and the end of things. It is not. You can be in an office today and you are there, you are powerful. Tomorrow, you just can't even order one soldier to move or even one civilian to move. And now you are the one being told, come over here and explain this. I thought that is something so basic that all of them should understand. So they need to be very careful.
Okay. So the last question on the military and the behavior or actions of some of the officials will come from me. You mentioned that it took long for you to actually believe that this was a military official's Twitter handle. And it reminded me of when you advised this same official to stop engaging in partisan politics when he's still in uniform. And he said you should take your advice to your small party or something like that. Was that when you realized that actually it is a military official, or when you actually thought, no, it can't be a military official of the level of the commander land forces that says something like that?
At some point, I thought that maybe there was a handler for General Mhozi's Twitter handle, but I think eventually I am convinced that he must be the one, because even when you have a handler, if he makes one mistake, then you remove them or you reprimand them and then they rectify their ways. But if you engage 2, 3, 4, 5 times, that's a trend. But again, I am glad that what we said then has been vindicated by the military and General 7 sitting and ensuring that they call him to order. That shouldn't have even waited for any of us from outside the army to say. That's something they should have done promptly the first time it happened. But we've been vindicated. And I'd like to communicate those who were hyping things and on social media. Fortunately, I no longer see many of them who used to comment then when the order was given from the meeting, which sat, I think, in Atuhaire at the brigade headquarters. All of them went mute. They should learn a lesson.
They were rendered jobless.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. You know, some of them are still mostly possibly young, inexperienced, maybe move on an emotional level, operate at an emotional level, you know. So we have to be careful. You know, we have had a country that is prone to violence whenever regimes change. We don't want a repeat of that. So we may have differences in political opinions, but we have one country in which to live, really. I can't understand anybody who wouldn't see sense in that and act in the most reckless and irresponsible ways, you know, because when a country implodes, many people get the flak. And at that point, you can't even know who gets the flak, who doesn't get the flak, because at times when chaos, you know, spreads, many people get hurt. Innocent people, many people become, you know, unnecessary victims of a situation that is not of their own making. So really my own urge to many who are in politics as well as those who are in the military, police and security is that we must act responsibly. We have one country. Whatever differences we may have, we want to ensure that change is inevitable. That's another thing we must recognize. But how do we manage it in a way that it is not, you know, explosive as we have had in the past?
Thank you, General. Thank you, General. We have about 10 minutes to end this discussion, but I want to make sure we answer all the questions that we already have in. I've seen people on Twitter requesting to speak, but it's challenging since we are also streaming live for the Facebook and YouTube audiences. So I'll just read your questions as they come in. General, if you could limit the responses to a few minutes so that we finish this. I'm going to ask you a question from two people, and it's about the same thing. One is Okiria Gerard, who is asking about you joining forces of change to rescue the increasing prices of essential commodities, among other things happening in the country. And the other was coming from Obes Brand, who was also asking why you don't join other forces. Why you don't join forces, for him is more specific, with the National Unity Platform to dispose of the old man Museveni, who has refused to relinquish power peacefully. So it's a question about joining forces generally.
I don't know what they mean by saying joining forces, because what we are doing is building our capabilities so that, one, we are not in conflict with any political organization. We're not in conflict with any strategy which is being applied by anybody. Nobody ever hears us attacking any strategy. Nobody hears us as NT attacking any other party. So that in itself means that it's a positive trend that we are trying to set in the politics of the country. Two, we're building capabilities. Some of the crises can disappear, some of them may be long, but we are trying to avoid a much more long-standing problem, that you can get a regime which has eroded the moral fabric of society, which has broken down systems, which has caused a state of desperation in the population. And then when a new group goes in, it is unprepared. To me, that's the worst nightmare. And I can understand people feeling affected by the current prices. It's important, and we support those who are able to apply their efforts in that. But we must keep on applying our effort as well in preparing for how to rectify all these problems. So it's a question of where do you spend most time? We are spending time in building our organizational capabilities, so that even when we give support to any group that support will be effective. We don't move on emotions. We prepare ourselves. The biggest problem, I must admit, is our lack of capability to build faster, and that's just resources. But we cannot just. I hope at one point Ugandans will be able to fund the opposition party so that we can do the necessary things which need to be done. Because look, like when we talk about civil action, you have spent time and effort and resources to build capabilities layer by layer. The weakness in civil actions that you notice, which is so visible, is that the moment one leader is arrested, the rest collapses. What does that tell you? You have to prepare. So that even when one leader is arrested, another layer springs up. That layer is arrested, another layer springs up. That can't happen by accident. There must be time and effort and resources applied in that. The problem I have with many of our people, many people talk and talk and talk and talk. But when it comes to actions, you prepare, whether it is civil disobedience, whether it is us who are organizing. If we are not funded, if you don't fund NUP, you don't fund DP, you don't fund FDC, you don't fund NT, you put in 5,000, 10,000, you're asking for actions. How? Sorry about that, but maybe I should also say some of these truths.
Okay. Okay, we have a question also from someone called Mr. Responsible, who is saying, ask him what his silence means in the current situation and all that is going on in the country. Truth be told, as Ugandans, we are not seeing any physical and tangible thing Muntu is doing to build structures in his party.
I don't know whether that young, I don't know who, I didn't get the name. Whatever party he belongs to, if you are not putting any money in that party, whether it is JEMA, NUP, FDC, and you are someone asking parties to do something, you are not being realistic, to be honest with you. And let me end by saying this in terms of funding. As I've indicated before, success comes when opportunity meets with preparation. Opportunity will come, there's going to be change at some point. But any group which gets in there, if it is not well prepared, forget about success in resolving these challenges that we see. We'll go through another vicious cycle like we've gone through the last 60 years. But the message seems not to sink in people's minds. They go to churches, they put in money. They pay zakah in the mosque. The Christians pay 10%. When someone dies, they can raise 10, 20 million within a day. When there is a wedding, within a month, they can raise 50 million. But you're talking about structures. People, teams to move, they need money. Whether it is JEMA, whether it is DP, whether it is NUP, FDC, or ANT. So until Ugandans wake up to that fact, and two, ensure that you cushion these parties. We've just talked about the vulnerability of this region, of these countries, of this continent. Unless we have got robust parties that really can work to lift us out of the existential threat we face because of the economic, political dynamics at a global level, I can tell you, you will be enslaved. Parties can become vulnerable. There's money rotating all over the world. There are things parties can easily get compromised. So if there aren't enough Ugandans to recognize that they must secure their own future, and people keep talking and talking and talking, how will parties organize?
I have a question about involvement of the youth. One comes from David Kwesiga on Facebook, and he asks, what strategy have you put forward as ANT leadership to engage the youth so that they feel they belong to the party and be felt on the ground? And then there's another similar question on Twitter from someone called James Ampumuza, who is saying, How is ANT ready to involve the youth to win the 2026 elections at every stage?
One, to be honest with you, the youth under 35 are 75% of the population. So logically, they should be the biggest percentage in any party. And I don't see how any group that is that large cannot influence the direction of things in an organization in which they are the majority. That's the first starting point. Two, the only thing we do is keep training to attract those who are like-minded, because we are people who really are focused, disciplined. We are a very driven organization. So we keep trying to network and recruit as many. We are succeeding in that regard. Not as it should be, because we lack financial resources to move around, but we are building, establishing branch networks at universities. We in the rolling out of the rest of the country, which we've been planning to do, but hampered by resources, is we have branch networks at the village, the parish, the sub-county, the district, and at the national level. And therefore, the more youth that we get who are ready to work out of commitment, not pay. Because I hear like at some universities, for youth to go blowing vuvuzela, they ask for 30,000 per day, you know. You get that 30,000 for 1 week, all right, that is about 210,000. But the moment you get out of the university gates, you don't have a job. So that's the mentality within the youth. So the youth, some, not many, we get some who are good. To be honest with you, we have very good young men and women who are resilient, who are, you know, go through sacrifices, go through things which are so tough. But we know that's a hardening process, and we are preparing to manage this country better. So any youth who wants to participate in an effective way, in a positive way, add value to the development process of the country, choose a party whose thinking is like yours, and join that party and influence it along the direction that you want the party to move.
So I'm going to ask the last question and shelve the rest of the questions we have, because they are not time bound, for the next session, and share them with whoever will be steering it. The last question I'm asking is about the effectiveness of this mobilization strategy of online engagement being felt at the grassroots level, with the problems of network and people who cannot afford data.
That's a challenge we face, because even when we have online meetings, which we have quite often, the areas where I find that they can't reach, they don't have stable networks. In a number of areas, we don't have leaders or members who are rich enough yet to buy phones which can be applied, you know, on such social networks. They have got the capability type. So it's an ongoing process. The more we get members who can engage in enterprises, which is part of the training that we do, the more we will have more who can be linked. So that's why we do two things. We do online, we also do physical. We keep on doing simultaneously, but the online will keep on growing, of course, as there are more technological advancements, as we train in entrepreneurship, and many more leaders get involved in entrepreneurial skills and can generate money, and they get money to buy their own phones and put there their own data. The more active the party becomes. That's the future. That's where we're heading. Whatever level it is, whether it's at 20% now, we must keep building it until it reaches 90, 100%, at whatever time that happens.
Thank you, Honorable. I think our time is really fast spent. Like I said, we have people who would have preferred to ask questions on Twitter who kept sending in requests, but maybe next time we should devise ways of how to allow them to ask questions and at the same time benefit the audiences that are not on the Twitter space. I am going to ask you to give your closing remarks about the discussion and also the situation in this country as you see it, and then we can wait for the next session of these engagements.
One, I'd like to thank you, Agatha, for hosting me, to thank all the people who are on all platforms, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, for spending your time and engaging this conversation. I'd like to thank those who sent in questions. And basically to all of us to recognize that we're in a very, very challenging period, you know, with the high commodity prices, high fuel prices, uncertainty in transition. But those of us who have had the opportunity to go to school, we must apply our minds in a disciplined way, not to afford to be desperate or frustrated, and keep on focus on how we can manage now as we unfold into a future which inevitably we will be going into, even in tough conditions. How do we exercise influence within our spheres of influence? Because every human being has got a sphere of influence. And those who have got 10 people around you, 20 people around you, 30 people around you, whatever platform you operate from, whether it's family, whether it's an organization, influence people, one, to overcome fear, two, to apply their efforts and resources in building for the future, most so those who are, you know, in parties. Even if you are not an active party member, you can fund a party which you believe in, which you trust in. And also, those who are in the ruling party, for them to know that the country is in serious problems, and know that they need to be part and parcel of working for a smooth, stable transition. Because people who are in NRM, who are looting the country, are not even 1%. So why do you allow yourself to be so vulnerable? And you are put into a situation where you become almost impotent. You are incapable of doing anything right just because you are held in the grip of a small group of people. And yet your future is at stake, more so the under 35s, who are 70% of the population. You need to take a stand so that we can work for a better future. And may God bless you all.
Thank you, Honorable, for being part of this conversation and for your views. I'd like to ask Cynthia or Ambassador Sempala to take note of the questions we haven't been able to ask, since after this session, some of them which are on Zoom, we might not have them. I saw one about the Bush War that had 27 people and was successful, and one about women's rights. If we could note them down and then address them, for General to address them in the next conversation. Thank you everyone for being part of the show. And like I have promised, I'm going to engage with the team at ANT to see how we can engage everyone who wants to directly ask General his comments. Thank you, Ogon, for being part of the space from the beginning. Ronald Mukasa-Senkubuge, I could ask you the same question people have been asking General about your silence. Maybe you can also answer and engage as you used to engage during the campaign, so that people get to hear your views. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation, and we'll see you again next month when we resume with the Ask General Muntu discussions. Have a nice weekend.
Hello, good evening. This is Edith. I just wanted to say thank you so much before you leave us for excellent conduction of this Ask Mugisha Muntu, and also thank General for his leadership by example. I really believe that this Ask is adding a lot of value.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you everyone on the team who stayed behind. Nyakato, thank you so much. Work well executed. The questions were coming in on time, in as much as some of them may not have been responded to. Let's know that they will be responded to another time. Great job. Thank you. Boaz, you're
Aboki
welcome.
Mwemuta.
Nyakato, you can now respond. Ruseka, you're not on air now. You can respond. You're just inside the room. I think she's trying to respond, but there's a network problem. Boaz,
Thank you,
you're
colleagues, for putting this together again. Thank you, Sylvain. I've seen Boaz. Thank you. Thank you. Aboki, thank you. And Ayeza, who is already left, also thanks to her. Tukurire. Thanks a lot, colleagues.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Thank you, Ambassador Edith, as well.
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Nyakato. Okay, Boaz.
Yes, hello.
You can say hi and make some comments. What do you think is appreciated? What do you think would make some adjustments or make it much better going forward?
Good evening, comrades. My name is Boaz.
Hello.
I think some of you don't know me.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, hello.
Yes,
I am very grateful that I had the opportunity to step in a bit quickly when Cynthia had to run a personal errand. For the engagement, I have been in one before, and this enabled the listeners to ask questions directly to the general. And I think for me, today's meeting was very well coordinated by everyone, the team. Thank you so much for that. But as Agatha mentioned, it might be helpful to enable some people to ask questions in the future or in the subsequent meetings. But again, I think it's an organizational question than technical. Yeah. But thank you so much, Jeno. I will try to, together with Cynthia, we've already been writing the script of all the points that we've been sharing, but we will re-listen to the audio and script properly everything that has been said so that we can use it on our digital platforms in the next coming days. Again, thank you very much. And just one more comment. I'm in Uganda right now. I just had my dinner at Baguma here in Kampala. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
And as I mentioned
Welcome.
to you, thank you so much. As I mentioned to you, Ambassador Edith and General Muntu, that I'll be coming during the summer for an internship at CAS, and some of the time will be put to the party. I am working out on something with the Honorable Alice, and I think I will also be informing you further on how we can work on the time that I can use to support the party for the time I'll be in Uganda. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the idea of people asking questions, I think technically Agatha didn't know because Timothy was able to do that the other time. So what we're going to do is to have Agatha and Timothy interact and see how it's supposed to be run, but also engaging several other potential moderators to know the kind of technical capabilities we have and to understand that we need to use them maximally. Thank you for pointing it out, Boaz.
You're more than welcome.
Any other comment before we say we call it a day? Yes, Ambassador.
Yeah, I just wanted to, maybe we need to now continue offline the conversation or following up, just tweeting on the conversation. And I don't know whether the recording on Twitter Space is going to be shared so that we can share it with those who have not been able to participate, or even those who have participated might want to go through it again. So this is a question.
Yes, the recording can be shared, Ambassador. The recording can be shared. But also remembering that on YouTube, information remains. On Twitter, on our Twitter handle also, the information remains. One can go there and play it. But let's make sure that we share the recording as well. Thank you. All right. Final comment, Jeno, and then Ambassador, you pray for us.
Thank your colleagues who have been able to spend your time and effort in backing up this whole system. And I don't know how many, I don't know what this one is. Is it the 5th or 6th or something?
We are in the 7th month now.
That is the 7th appearance, right? The 7th
Yes.
event. Okay. And I really thank you for the effort in building this. And I think on the other platform for the other leaders, maybe we're in the 4th event or something like that.
Yes.
I would like to thank you for spending all your time and effort and resources in this. And yeah, let's keep building. Because even if you keep on getting 10 people, or whatever number it is, if you get 10 people listening in and you get one out of them who gets convinced, if they are on 50 and you get 3 or 4 or 5, you know, they keep building. It's a process. So personally, I'm never worried by numbers. We have to keep building as long as we keep on doing the right things and we have stick to our message. I believe it is a message which will keep on penetrating the consciousness of people. And I have a feeling that at some point we will see a real shift in the population by a significant percentage. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, General. You're very right. I think we actually had 126 today on Twitter Spaces. I remember some time back we had ever hit almost 140 plus. I don't know what will happen, but today we had 126 ranging in there, which means it's a good number. Let's keep on sharing the information like Ambassador said, and these other technical elements, slowly we are getting closer, and we shall, at some point, I am very sure that by around September, October, some of these technical issues will no longer be issues, and we shall be even more standard. So starting exactly at 5 and finishing exactly at 6:30 when we have covered the critical elements of what we needed to cover. And also tracking those people, especially like the youth who asked those 2 questions. I hope I'll get to their contacts, and because there are questions which call for one wanting to find out why would somebody ask such a question, and therefore he's likely to come and join the team once he's requested.
Just a second. I have sometimes people who express a desire to join the party. I don't know whether they are part of our teams who are tracking and therefore making follow-ups.
Yes, we are, but not yet fully effective. We are banking now on some of the youth members that we had in the training who expressed direct interest of joining the volunteers team, those who wrote to me. And I'm happy to mention that today we had one online and she was doing some work. I have about 4 other people so that we could build the a firm team of following up with those that express interest. We are,
Or at least,
but I commit we are not.
or in the,
Go ahead.
or we need to find out within the party specific people who will be doing that, so that we can keep referring them, whoever expresses interest, to send them the number and the name of a person. But the party first has to agree on who does the follow-up, because it would also seem irresponsible on our part for someone to express interest and there's no follow-up.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay, we will. I'm going to follow up with that with William and Cynthia and Grace, and identify from the comms team we can find temporarily one, but along the way someone to connect them with at the secretariat.
The best thing, I think, would have to have one person with their WhatsApp number, because giving direct calls can also bother them. But if it's a WhatsApp number and it's someone who's active, who can now guide them either through WhatsApp or email or whatever, but give them guidelines. This is what you do, and engage them. Basically, engagement is the most critical thing. So we need to have conversations carried out to know who would be doing that, either one or two persons, and with the numbers which they can use. We can also, maybe those who have got more than one number, see the one which is you can prefer to use for a purpose like that. Yeah.
All right, I will follow up with that. Thank you so much. Ambassador, could you please pray for us?
Yeah, Boaz, there is a new member in Brussels who is extremely active and very keen and very, who is mobilizing both in Europe and even here in Uganda, actually. I had sent the contact to Cynthia. I don't know whether you have shared.
Yeah, I know him, David.
Okay.
I've already been in contact with David. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. David is really keen, and he wants I think he's ready to take some roles. So maybe you can follow up on that as well. Yeah,
Absolutely.
let us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Father, we give you praise and honor. We thank you for the concluded Ask Mugisha Muntu program. We thank you, Lord Father, for the leadership of ANT and of General Muntu and Honorable Lasso. We thank you, Lord Father, that you know the plan you have for Uganda. And that plan will be fulfilled, not by power, not by might, but by the Spirit of the living God. We thank you, Lord Father, that you are not indifferent to the suffering that Ugandans are going through, because you have said that when the righteous rule, people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, people groan. We are groaning as a people. Women are groaning, children are groaning, young people are groaning, men are groaning. We are all groaning, Father. And we thank you, Lord Father, that you will enable us, that you lift up leaders who will cause Uganda to rejoice. We thank you, Lord Father, for ANT. We ask for divine favor, divine connections, divine guidance. We ask for resources, Father. We ask for entrepreneurship, for everything that we need in order to fulfill your plan and purpose for which you have created this party. Because we believe, Lord, that this party was not made by man, by an inspiration of man, but an inspiration of the Holy Spirit. So we ask, Lord Father, that you continue to guide us. We thank you for those who are technically managing these programs. We thank you for Sylvian. We thank you for Cynthia, for all the members of the team. We thank you, Lord Father, that we shall continue. We shall not be discouraged. We shall not be fearful. You have forbidden us to be anxious for anything, but you have told us to come with our issues to you. Father, you know all our issues, and we continue to bring them to you. We thank you, Lord Father, that we are overcomers. We shall overcome everything that is an obstacle to us. In the mighty name of Jesus, we commit the rest of the evening, the rest of the month. We thank you also for the upcoming conversations with other leaders. We thank you that they will also be successful, that we are growing from strength to strength. And Father, that everything that we do will glorify your mighty name. In Jesus' mighty name, I've prayed with thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen. Bless you, everyone. Enjoy
Night.
your weekend.
Bless you too.
Bless you. Good night.
Good night.